How is everybody doing? What's going on? I'm always supposed to scooch on over here. So we're talking about Cop City again. What's the dealio? What's going on in Georgia? What's going on in Atlanta, Georgia? They've got this facility that they are getting ready to build on. Construction site, got fencing up, got porta potties there. They got a bunch of knuckleheads running around. By knuckleheads, I mean like 150 of them that show up to this, mostly peaceful protest. Same exact deal back in the summer of 2020 with the whole, racial protests or police brutality protests, whatever you want to call them. People peacefully protesting down the streets, but then it just goes off on these wild tangents. This one was 150 people going from a music deal, and a bunch of rappers, stuff like that. And then we're going to see it. We're going to see video, kind of that. It's like night vision from a drone, whatever, of all of these people coming on to this construction site, and lobbing fireworks, Molotov cocktails, throwing rocks at the police. I mean, just a wild, wild scene. I'm going to read to you from today. We're going to show video from both CNN and Fox. The CNN video is pretty interesting because we wouldn't have seen this type of coverage before. They are actually trying to take a somewhat objective approach to this. And they've got a good guy who's doing their law enforcement, a guest, this is our guy in law enforcement. And we're going to watch him. And he kind of tells it like it is. And then Fox has got the attorney general from state of Georgia, and he really tells it like it is. He comes right out and says, this is not Washington. This is not Oregon. This is Georgia. This is how we handle things. And Georgia has a state law on their books that is literally domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism, you get convicted in the state of Georgia, you can get anywhere from 5 to I think 35 years. Let's give all these mostly peaceful protesters, let's give them 30 years just to cool their jets. They'll be out in half the time. So, 15 years. What's 15 years when, you're just really in love with those trees and, they just really are concerned about the forest and wild stuff, right? I mean, this is literally just straight up terrorism. There's no other way. There's no other way. So to see CNN, Don Lemon on the clip that I just got through watching, he's like, all right, so they've been threatening, they had a firefight a while ago and one of them got killed. And now we've got them throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails in the forest and they're all trespassing. How serious is this? Well, if you had fireworks, launched at you and a bunch of rocks and maybe a Molotov cocktail in there, how serious would you consider this to be, Don Lemon? I mean, yeah, it's not good, right? And they're lighting construction equipment on fire. I think they lit a job shack on fire. So, and then some of the information out there, some of the spin on this is so incredible. I mean, it's mind boggling where you're defending the forest. They're going to replace a bunch of the trees. You guys don't care about a forest. You're lighting fireworks off in the forest. I mean, what's Smokey the Bear say about that? Forest fires, people don't, whatever that is. Smokey says, don't cause a forest fire. You know what I mean? I mean, just don't do it. Just don't do it. All right, let's jump into it. And let's see what we got going on here. But my point to that last little thing was they're trying to spin this any way they can. And I mean the left and the far left. They're like, this is about, we don't need more policing in our community. Atlanta, you don't? Really? Have you looked at your crime stats? I got to give you a hint. It's not good. You need a ton more cops. You need a ton more training. And that's what this is. This is a training facility, not just for police officers, but for firefighters, for EMT technicians, for all first responders. They're going to have an equestrian center in there. So, people riding horses around and trained in law enforcement. They're going to have all kinds of stuff. It's a $90 million facility. It's a big facility. Now, back in 2020, we were all hot to trot about police reform, right? Well, that's exactly what this is. This is additional training. It's a training center. Training center. So you're getting the training that you wanted the police to have. Now you just don't want, you don't want anything to do with policing. And they're saying, wow, this kind of facility, it promotes the, industrialization of policing. It militarizes the police force. I'm like, well, look at who they're dealing with. They're dealing with domestic terrorists. That's exactly the training they need to deal with these kind of knuckleheads and what they've got to, what they're faced with, right? All right, let's jump on in. This is your bird's eye view article here. And some of you have probably already seen this story, but what's interesting is that, again, this story didn't get much attention. It's like, yeah. Could you imagine if this was the Proud Boys? Could you imagine if Tiny was out in front of this? Tiny just got convicted of a whole the whole laundry list of convictions. He's the guy that's kind of famous down in Portland. He's a big dude. That's why I call him Tiny. But Tiny's probably going to do some time. So could you imagine if Tiny did this? He's throwing fireworks and Molotov cocktails at police. Burning stuff up, this would be absolutely front page news everywhere. And yet it's only folks, that are reasonable that are reporting this. It's just not shocking though, but it's kind of like, okay, so we're just going to keep going with this. And this is just going to keep on happening. The Atlanta Police Department announced the arrest of 23 people following a music festival that turned into a violent protest. I looked at the people that were at the music festival. Yeah, didn't know any of them. But maybe it's a local Atlanta deal. I don't know. At the location where Atlanta plans to build a police and fire training facility. On Sunday, around 5:30 p.m., police said a group of violent agitators used the cover of a peaceful protest to create a coordinated attack on construction equipment and police officers at the proposed Atlantic Public Safety Training Center. So much of this reminds me of exactly how it went down with CHOP. Same thing. Started off, a bunch of local folks, and then all of a sudden, they took over that area of CHOP, of Capitol Hill, and then all of these people came in from the outside. And when I was there, I remember thinking, none of these people are from Seattle. Not one of these folks is from Seattle. And I was there, I was in the mix there for a bunch of the days during the day when it wasn't quite that dangerous, when they were negotiating when Antifa was negotiating kind of how it was going to go down at the end. And there was a day where the Department of Transportation brought in all of the equipment they needed to remove all of the barriers, the street barriers that City of Seattle had given to Antifa to make CHOP, make the borders of CHOP. And I remember being there going, not one of these folks is from Seattle. These are all total outsiders. And that's how this goes, right? You got outsiders that come to these causes, and right now they're in Atlanta. I am so glad they're in Georgia. Because folks in Georgia, they're just not going to put up with this nonsense the same way that people in Seattle did, especially Portland. Mayor Ted just out there, big, photo op and grin fest with Antifa. This is probably going to go pretty good. Atlanta officials stated the group changed into all black, went inside the construction area, and threw large rocks, bricks, Molotov cocktails, and fireworks at law enforcement. You throw a Molotov cocktail or a firework at law enforcement, you should get the book thrown at you. Just period. You just should. No exception. You do that, just throw them in the book. Get 20 years, 25 years, something, give them something substantial so that they can spend the time in jail, in prison, thinking about what they did. I know they're not going to reform, but they're also not going to be on the streets. So let's lock them up. I say we lock them up. This is not a protest, Atlanta Police Department officials said at a press conference Sunday night. This wasn't about a public training center. This was about anarchy. Anarchy. And, Antifa is so loosely coordinated, but they had online announcements about this kind of thing happening all last week. So everybody kind of knew something was up. And then they had the mostly peaceful, the protests in Atlanta away from this facility started off. They were just, they're doing their thing. And then it just devolved into 150 of these folks just coming into this construction site. They got behind the fences. You can kind of see how they came in, and they got behind the fences, and then they've got this fence barricade. It's not much of a barricade. It's a metal fence. It's a metal construction fence, right? Because they're going to be building something here soon. So authorities said the illegal activity could have resulted in bodily harm. No injuries were reported. Yeah, no injuries were reported, but man, one cop, I mean, he had an incoming mortar round. You know what I mean? It's like, boom. If that would have hit him. So if the Proud Boys would have done this or anything even remotely close to this, this would have been just worldwide news. Instead, it's like, well, they're threatening to take down some trees. So we've got some activists here that are really concerned about the forest. And so they're lighting off fireworks in the forest. Officers have arrested a total of 23 people. So 35 originally were detained. 23 of them were arrested. Of those 23 people, how many people do you think were from Georgia? How many were from Georgia? I'll give you a hint. Dose. And one of those was a lawyer from the Southern Poverty Law Center. We're gonna talk about that too. What a douchebag. That Southern Poverty Law thing, you just look at stuff that comes out of there and you're like, who are you trying to kid? What are you even trying to do? All right, so we're going to run down the states where these people came from. So we got Georgia, Massachusetts, Louisiana, Indiana, Colorado, Massachusetts, Utah, France. We got France. I was also told there was an individual from Canada. We got Virginia, North Carolina, Arizona, New York, Connecticut, Wisconsin, Florida, Wisconsin. Not one from Oregon, right? No, too far. They don't have vehicles that can get that far, right? And they just don't. I mean, their ambulances get stuck halfway in Wyoming and they just wouldn't make it. So yeah, just some ridiculous stuff. So 23 people arrested. Now we got Tennessee. Okay, here it is. Robert Paul Frederick from Canada. We got Tennessee, Georgia, and New York. 2 from Georgia. This is not local. These are all outside agitators. Outside agitators. And that's one of those things where CNN's trying to spin it. Well, they're just really concerned about the forest and they want to support and they've been involved with how to handle the police. Yamin throw fireworks at them and Molotov cocktails. And because, we've seen that. And so far, if you haven't been following this storyline, and I don't blame you if you haven't. So, yeah, it's in Georgia. Unless you're in Atlanta, this hasn't really got all that much attention, has it? Been other stuff going on, right? So far, I believe up to this point, so we got 23 arrested here. There have already been, I believe, 19 arrested on domestic terrorist charges. Originally, there was like 5 in one incident. And then we had a march through downtown Atlanta that went sideways. And I think that's where another 14 got arrested. But this one with 23, that's a big pickup. Police say 28-year-old Thomas Jurgens, who works as a staff attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center, was one of only 2 Georgia residents involved in the chaos. All right, I'm going to put my headphones on. We're going to watch some video. Let's watch some video. What do you say? Let's see what we got going on here. You guys are talking about stuff. All right. Atlanta Cop City Anarchy sees at least 35 agitators detained, part of an international group. We're going to go. Here we go. Whoops. Hold on.
economic development project. It may be something that they don't like, but they are putting together.
Make sure you guys can hear this.
In Atlanta to undermine the rule of law and destabilize the system. But it isn't going to stand here. I mean, I've said this before. We are not Washington. We are not Oregon. This is the state of Georgia. You cannot come here. And Bill, just for the record, some of those arrested yesterday were from Massachusetts and New York and France and Canada. So this is a national network, an international group of people that are organized to come to our state to undermine a public safety training center. And one thing I want to say is they call it Cop City. That's a misnomer. This is for first responders, firefighters, EMTs. So to say Cop City is just playing into what the left is trying to create a narrative on this, and it's wrong.
A couple things here. You're arrested 35. How many were from out of state?
All but 2 were from out of state, and 23 individuals have been charged with domestic terrorism. Because in Georgia, if you come here and if you throw Molotov cocktails, bottles, rocks, engage in violence in order to change public policy, if you are going to damage infrastructure to change public policy, we have a law on the books that's domestic terrorism, and you will be charged. And if you are convicted, that is 5 to 35 years in prison.
Okay, a couple of things here. Paul Moore was talking to us during the commercial.
Give it to him.
Is that a state charge or a federal charge that you just described?
State charge.
State charge. Why not a federal charge?
Okay. Now I'm going to skip you to 40.
And again, in Georgia,
407 here.
Terrorism for engaging in this.
Large.
There we go.
Some people have been camping out there in the woods. Are they still doing that?
There are some individuals, as I'm told, that went back into the forest last night, and there may be an operation going on right now, so I don't want to get into specifics. But obviously, it's not their property. At a minimum, they are trespassing. And again, whatever we need to do, whatever charges we need to bring on those that end up breaking our laws, we'll end up doing it.
Okay, Chris Carr, we will stay in touch with you in your office. Thanks for coming on today, the Attorney General there in the state of Georgia.
So what was interesting there to me is they know that these protesters are in the forest, but and they're doing these sweeps where they're basically the sweep where they took out the one protester, which happened, what was that? A couple of week ago, something like that. It was probably a couple of weeks ago. Little Turtle, whatever the Spanish name, that's what his nickname was. He was a protester that was in there. And he took a shot at a cop, and he got eliminated. He got taken out. And so what's been really interesting is to see all of the spin from the left and from the majority of media indicating he was killed. He was just mercilessly killed. You know, we're debating whether the police, you know, and that cop got shot in the stomach. He was in critical condition. I think he's going to be okay. I haven't heard otherwise, but last I heard he was doing okay. But he took a bullet to the stomach. So if somebody shoots at a cop, you know, it's game over, right? And you're in a secured area where the police are basically doing a sweep. So these sweeps have been going on. And now you've probably got another sweep, kind of like the final sweep on CHOP that happened in Seattle. You had just they just went through and took things out, took people out, took their center out. Let's take another look at another little bit of video here. It's got a bunch of video here. This is the ESPN.
Attacking the future site of a police and firefighting training facility. This happened in Atlanta last night. This is surveillance video capturing the moments that hundreds of protesters swarmed the construction site wearing camouflage and masks. Police say they threw bricks, large rocks, even Molotov cocktails. They also set fire to police and construction vehicles along with a trailer. Opponents of the project have nicknamed it Cop City. Tension between protesters and police has been escalating there for months.
Actions such as this will not be tolerated. When you attack law enforcement officers, when you damage equipment, you are breaking the law. And this was a very violent attack that occurred this evening, very violent attack. This wasn't about a public safety training center. This was about anarchy, and this was about the attempt to destabilize.
It was about 35 protesters. Here you can see police you can see fireworks being shot at some police officers. That proposed facility has sparked protests for various reasons. Environmental activists have been fighting to preserve the forest. Others believe the training center will increase the militarization of police forces. Police say they detained 35 people following the attack. We'll have a lot more on that through the morning.
We begin with that breaking news out of Mexico. Officials.
So, do you want the police to have more training or not? Which is it? They just want a cause, don't they? They just want something to go after the police with because they just don't like police because anarchy. So they're going to pretend that they care about the forest, even though when they go in, they've already burned down 2 foundations of homes nearby in this proposed cop city. They've burned down 2 homes. They burned up a guy's truck, all kinds of garbage and just devastation to the forest where they've been whacking stuff up and living in tree houses. These folks are living in tree houses in the forest. And I think that's what the Georgia law enforcement was alluding to is, hey, I don't want to give out too much of what's going on, but, there's probably an operation going on here. So they've got an operation going on, and they're going to drop the hammer. They just are. Let's have them arrest everybody, right? Everybody. I mean, with 150 people in there, that could be a massive arrest because that's how many folks they had. All right. So the next video clip is. This is a good one. This is CNN, but there's information here. Now we're going to go to what the inside of it looks like. And then they've also got some good aerial footage on the next couple of clips here. You'll kind of see how this went down and how many bodies were actually in there. All right, let's do this.
Tell us what you're seeing there on the ground.
Yeah, good morning, Caitlin. We're on the edge of this forest where countless numbers of activists have made their home. They're camping out here in opposition to this proposed police fire and training facility. You can see behind me some of the items left behind. They've even got porta-johns here, a left behind tent. It's become a campsite and a sort of staging area where we're at. They even have a free store.
Okay, let's be clear. The guy didn't know what he was talking about. The city didn't bring porta potties out there. They didn't hire porta potties. This is a new construction build. This is a commercial site. They are bringing porta potties on site because construction workers got to go to the bathroom too, not Antifa.
Clothes where they exchange goods here. And earlier this morning, I spoke to 2 of the activists who say that they're living inside this forest right now because they don't want what they call Cop City built. They see it as a paramilitary facility, a step towards further militarizing the police in this country. And it is a robust coalition of activists that are here, not just those that are against this facility, but also those that don't want the environment harmed here by this facility. But it's become much bigger than this so-called Cop City. It has become, in a sense, ground zero for activists to come in from across the country to confront police, or at the very least, air their grievances against police. And it's what we saw here happen on Sunday. 35 people taken into custody. Of those, 23 have been charged with domestic terrorism, and it's similar to the other charges that we've seen from individuals who have confronted police at this site. Things have only gotten more tense since a climate activist was shot and killed by police. Manuel Teran, Georgia State Police, that Teran opened fire on them first, and they returned fire, killing him. What is clear, and the bottom line here, is that things have only gotten more tense. This week has been promoted by protesters as being a week of action and protests, with the fate of this proposed police and fire training facility, dubbed Cop City by its opponents, hanging in the balance. Caitlin?
You just saw that firework go off by that cop. That was close. That was a good shot. Somebody who launched that, they've been launching fireworks for a long time, because accuracy like that, yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question, of course, Nick, is how long that these are going to go on, what these protests could look like, given how violent we've seen them get.
Nick, stand by. We're going to keep Nick, as we're going to bring in now CNN's chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst.
Okay, so I'm going to skip to a little bit here. And this guy has good stuff to say.
Between police and a protester who opened fire on a state police officer who was seriously wounded. The protester was killed. We saw a second wave of that in downtown Atlanta not at the construction site where they burned police cars, broke bank windows, attacked businesses. So you've got a couple of interesting dynamics here, which is you've got groups of local protesters who have a position on this training ground and whether it's going to infect the environment and destroy a wooded area. But then you have the out-of-town group that's come in, and out of the 23 people charged yesterday, 2 are from the state of Georgia. The rest are what police refer to as professional out-of-town agitators who have inserted themselves into this to create a flashpoint, or what the protesters would say are, supporters from out of town who are experienced in taking on authority and dealing with the police. However you want to look at that, you see it starts with a protest march, which is legal and under police escort and going by the site. Then it turns into the launching of fireworks at the police, shooting of fireworks at police, Molotov cocktails, burning of a police ATV. And that is that group of out-of-towners who, they call these black bloc tactics, where you change out of whatever you're wearing into your all-black clothes, makes it harder for police to describe who did what, based on the clothing description. You move out of the crowd, you do what they call your direct action, and then disappear back into the crowd. So it's been very dicey.
Very dicey. Dicey indeed. I mean, dicey. That's kind of an understatement, don't you think? Very easily, you could have had a cop get killed. Simple as that, right? Simple as that. So dicey, yes, one word. But his description of that is kind of, that's what we needed a long time ago. But, we didn't get that. We got all kinds of other descriptions about mostly peaceful protesters. Nobody broke it down to, yes, there was at one point where it was peaceful, but then it just went down this crazy rabbit hole. And that's what we're talking about. That is the violent agitators. And that's what this was, right? These were violent agitators. So there's no way this facility is not getting built. So Georgia police, and they're probably bringing in, who knows who, are they bringing in the National Guard? Maybe, because it sounds like they've got, Antifa and whatever other entities have got a few hundred people there on site. This has been building for a while, right? And that's what was interesting about CHOP, is that it's like it grows, and then people get freaked out. I might actually get arrested for this. And then it comes down to a core group of people. And this facility, because this area is so large and they can literally live in the forest, I think that's enabled more numbers to come there and make it more of a, I don't want to say a romantic ideal, but hey, yeah, I bunked with you in those tree houses in Atlanta. Do you remember that? I mean, what protester this is their thing isn't into that? To me, it's ridiculous because, number one, you're trespassing. All these folks are trespassing. And you saw on that aerial footage just how many people were coming down that eastern property line, and they were coming south, right? I think I've got my directions correct there based on just sun patterns I saw in previous footage. I think that gate opens to the northwest. And so west is off to the left is kind of how I figured it. So those people are coming due south, and then they come up to the front where they've got the massive gate. And we've seen this gate before. This gate before is where we had Molotov cocktail come over the top. This is some real violence going on. And yet people want to spin it as, well, they need to have their voices heard. They need to have their voices heard. And you could tell, listening to the Attorney General from Georgia, ain't going to happen in Georgia. And that's why I am so thankful this is happening there. Because could you hear like Mayor Ted, or could you hear Mayor Jenny Durkin, who was really trying to walk both of those lines of keeping the protesters happy and not losing absolute control, which she did, during CHOP, lost absolute control. A couple of kids get murdered. All right, I guess we need to clear it out. And her house gets, peaceful protesters make a run on her house. I mean, could you imagine those folks dealing with this? Now, that's why I'm thankful that this is happening in Georgia, where they take care of business. They just do. And you can see that from press release after press release after press release. These protesters are trying their best to spin this. And they're saying the large percentage of Georgia residents do not support Cop City. And I'm kind of like, well, that's just not true. That is flat not true. That's not what's going on. I think most Georgia folks, they either don't care or they're like, you know what? Atlanta is pretty rough right now. We need some more law enforcement. And so, this is exactly what everybody on the left was clamoring for. Let's defund the police and let's reroute their money into these social programs. It's going to be great. But moreover, we need police reform. Well, you're getting it. And now you don't want it to be built. And not only is it, we've talked about this, it's not just about the cops. This isn't a training facility for cops. This is first responders. Whenever you're, agitating, protesting, whatever is in trouble, they dial 911 and they want whatever entity is coming out of this training facility to come to them and to wipe their butt, right? I mean, that's just how this goes. But because, this is a police training facility, they're going to go after that and say, no, it's going to impact since when did Antifa ever hug a tree? I mean, really? Come on now. Seriously? No. All right. So the other big notable thing was Southern Poverty Law Center lawyer arrested, charged with domestic terrorism amid Atlanta Cop City attack. Is that shocking? That's just not shocking to me at all. I mean, that's just what happens, right? I mean, you get a bunch of knuckleheads together, you're going to have a knucklehead who's a lawyer from some he's an Atlanta lawyer. Do you think they might be reviewing his law license? Do you think they might take a little check-see? Let's see, Mr. Jerkins. Yeah, you were involved with a violent altercation with our policing. I don't know if you're the best representative to be dealing in any sense of law and or order in our state. We're going to have to have you go through some training. Or do they just pull his license? Or is there even can they do that? I don't know. But, probably I don't know in Georgia if the domestic terrorism charge, I don't know if that's a felony. So, because I know most of the time you can't practice law if you're a convicted felon, right? And that used to be the way it was back in the day anyway. Couldn't do a lot of things if you're a convicted felon because you broke the law and you got caught. And you get what you pay for, right? A lawyer for the Southern Poverty Law Center was arrested and charged with domestic terrorism over the violence that broke out in Atlanta on Sunday in relation to protests of a planned facility. An employee at the SPLC was arrested while acting. I thought he was throwing Molotov cocktails and, lighting things on fire, but he was acting and identifying as a legal observer on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild. Okay. Really? If you're there, you're there. If you're there, you're there, right? Guilty as charged. That was kind of some of my thought when I was on the sidewalk and the protesters in Portland, and get the federal building, you got the sidewalk, you get the federal building, and they had a big fence out in front. And I'm like, I don't really, they tore down this massive fence in Portland. And I was, running around with my GoPro, and I was kind of thinking, if a big crew of cops came out right now, I would be just as guilty of trespassing as everybody else here, because they put a fence up, and fence means don't come any further. It doesn't mean tear it down and see what happens. But with these agitators, that's exactly what happened. And later on there was There was tear gas and just a bunch of stuff and a bunch of whining and crying because people got tear gas in their eyes. These protesters are so weak. They are so weak. They're still wearing masks. They're still wearing masks so they can hide their identity, right? If they want to be real agitators, be proud of what you're supporting and show your face and don't wear the black bloc. Because if you are really, really, feel strongly about the trees and the environment and all this stuff, you should be out there with no mask, readily identifiable clothing, maybe wear a pink jumpsuit or I don't know, maybe just some pink sweatpants. I don't know. Identify yourself. If you're proud of your work, if you're really proud of the causes that you're supporting, I say mask off and be a man and go do your work and take whatever comes. But no, we go to that all black bloc thing. That's just, that's what weak people do. But of heavy-handed law enforcement intervention against protesters, and their arrest is not evidence of any crime, but of heavy-handed law enforcement intervention against protesters. And heavy-handed law enforcement is when a cop gets shot at and gets shot in the stomach. Heavy-handed law enforcement is when Molotov cocktails are thrown and when rocks are thrown. There was some big rocks coming over that fence. I don't know if you saw. There's clips. I mean, there's some big rocks. I mean, they're not going real far, but then some of those smaller rocks were just coming over in, waves. And you're like, oh, that's not good. That's not good. Thomas Webb Juergens was among the list of 23 suspected domestic terrorists released by the Atlanta Police Department on Monday. Yesterday, violence broke out on Atlanta on Sunday. Let's get down to the Atlanta Police Department revealed all the suspects are from out of state or another country except 2, including Juergens. And then they kind of go through, they looked at his LinkedIn account for one, Tom Juergens. That LinkedIn account has been deleted. And then we go to the bar site. They went to the bar site. They basically just went down, you can figure out who a lawyer is. So, the Poverty Law Group, the Southern Poverty Law Group, Law Center, they're probably going to say he was doing good work. He was doing the Lord's work out there in the forest, hugging those trees as a legal observer. I remember seeing press guys down in Portland and here in Seattle. It's like, you're not press. You're just some wannabe. You're just peaceful rocks. Mostly peaceful rocks coming over in waves over the fence. I mean, it's laughable, the spin that they try and put on this. They try and put the spin on this that, people are very concerned about the construction of this project. And I'm like, really? Well, in all those public hearings that you have to have one of these bad boys go on, what were you doing then? Where were you then? You're out protesting somewhere else. Or you were taking some downtime in between CHOP and Chaz and, Portland, the mostly peaceful protests for 100 nights or whatever in Portland. You were taking some much needed R&R, maybe a little vacation. And then you just go, all right, pandemic's over. We got to do something else. Well, let's go to Georgia. They're building a police center down there. Let's go wreak some havoc there. So this is not over. In no way, shape, or form, this is not over. So we're going to have a bunch more stuff on this. You're going to have at least one more where they clear people out. Guaranteed, you're going to have another one after that of protesting, moving people out, and you're going to have some people. You're going to have some people get injured, and I hope no cops get injured. I do not care about the peaceful protesters who are, violent extremists. If you want to start the war like that, then you get what's coming to you. You get what's coming to you. I think that's absolutely fair. So, and when you look at, somebody made a comment, Antifa has a specific brainwashing protocol. It's wild to see those people in real life because they are so detached from reality. You hear what they say and what they talk about, and you're like, well, it's no wonder that you are an absolute loser and you don't have a job and you were able to be out here just all day on a Wednesday, hanging out with your buddies. And you saw in that one video where they had the canopy where it said free and they give out free clothes. Well, they've got the whole free thing down. They've got free food. They've got free clothes. They've, in Portland, they had an old ambulance that was literally set up as an ambulance because high probability people are going to get hurt. They had people running around with milk so they could, wash out people's eyes. It's like, you're not blinded for life, people. It's going to be a few minutes and your eyes are going to get used to it. But then you got all these people running around with gas masks. And it's not like they gas you forever. You can get through it. You can run to another corner where there's no, you just got to run a little bit and you get away from the tear gas. These people are just so weak. I mean, it's annoying. But you're going to have more of this in Atlanta. You're going to have at least a couple of more big events happen. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes. All right, we're going to finish out with Marjorie Taylor Greene to propose designating Antifa as terror group after Atlanta Cop City burned. Congressman says she will introduce her resolution on Tuesday, today. So she is, and that's why I kind of included this story, is she's going to go down a route. She probably won't get far, but hey, let's bring it up anyway. Because isn't it interesting that we're talking about, declaring Antifa a domestic terror group when on, worldwide media, certain political members said that they were literally a myth. Huh. All right. And now it's so clear, right? I mean, and anybody who had kind of didn't have a screw loose was like, no, this is happening. This is this is a concerted effort. And this is just what's going on. So that whole myth thing, it was just so ridiculous. So ridiculous. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia. Did you guys see how she was doing kipping pull-ups? She was doing butterfly pull-ups where you just get the reps in. You don't do a full, all the way down, all the way up, but you have body momentum to get you going. And a whole bunch of people on the left just lost their minds. She was doing some legit pull-ups. And then she literally did another video where she was doing straight up pull-ups. And I lost track after 5 or 6, but guaranteed she can do more pull-ups than, 98% of the dudes in Congress, right? She's pretty strong. So, but she recorded that and people are like, no, why isn't she working? Why is she recording videos about her fitness when she's not working? Well, people have a life outside of politics and sometimes it's not all that. And they show a video and it was crazy talk to see the response to Marjorie Taylor Greene because she does say some stuff, right? She says some stuff. And then the response was, we don't like her doing pull-ups. And those kipping pull-ups, those are not good. Bad on the elbow joints. Yeah. So Marjorie Taylor Greene said Sunday she will be introducing a resolution declaring Antifa a terrorist group in response to protests in Atlanta that left a police training facility on fire. You saw the flames billowing, right? I mean, they were just going. You imagine if the Proud Boys did that? Can you imagine what the response would be? Yeah, it would be 24/7 far-right extremists. We must stop them. We must stop them. But in reality, how many far-right activists have been, or entities or groups have been arrested in recent months? I don't know of any, right? I don't know of any. But now we've got, 23 and then another 19, so you got 42 that have been arrested in Atlanta. I mean, and there's been minimal coverage at best. I was actually shocked to find that the segments that I did on CNN, but that's because their ratings are so low right now that I believe CNN, especially with Don Lemon, I mean, that guy has just stuck his foot in his mouth and he's just, he's been the golden boy for a long time, but I'm not sure how long, he can keep that going. But I think CNN with Jeff Licht, their new, Licht or however you pronounce it, with their new CEO, he's going, all right, so we went down the, Orange Man bad. We went down let's cover news from the far left perspective, because that's going to work, to, well, that's not working. None of these numbers, our numbers are going down. They're not going up. Maybe we cover the news. Maybe we provide kind of an objective view of the news. I'm not saying CNN is anywhere close to that, but you kind of get that feeling with some of the clips we just saw, where you got Don Lemon and his other two sidekicks who I pay zero attention to because they're constantly bickering and infighting. But you could kind of see them, they were covering a story that wasn't necessarily on their terms, right? This was a story that they didn't necessarily look comfortable with. Let's leave it at that, right? And that's kind of what it looks like, because Antifa are far left. They just are. And, if you're on the right side of things, you got to take responsibility for your far right. People, have you guys seen, I'm going to switch gears on you here before I read the rest of this. Have you guys seen the new Chris Rock special? If you haven't seen the new Chris Rock, the leftists are trying to erase women. They really are, aren't they? Yeah, they really are. Just had a man/woman set a world record in the 1,500 meters in the 50 to 54 age group category. Dude transitions to woman, goes out and runs, 1,500 meters, which is the metric mile, in just a hair over 5 minutes, I think. I mean, what are you doing there? That makes no sense. They're absolutely just women. Don't care. Yeah, we're just going to do this. This is what we want to do. But Chris Rock touches on all kinds of topics in his, and they're mostly anti-woke. It's pretty wild what he rips on Republicans. He rips on Democrats. He really rips on Will Smith and Will Smith's lawyer, Will Smith's wife. Because remember, Chris Rock took the slap from Will Smith, and he basically hasn't said anything publicly. He gave a little statement, probably about 10 minutes worth, on his most recent special that I think was live streamed on Saturday night this past weekend. I didn't see it then. I saw it on Sunday. I haven't laughed a lot in the last couple of weeks. Haven't had a lot to laugh about. And I laughed out loud probably 4 or 5 times. But I also enjoy really straight up hardcore humor. Like, oh, yeah, cringeworthy humor. And Chris Rock, he brings it. Plus, he was Pookie in New Jack City. Who doesn't want to watch that movie? That's an epic movie right there. So, smoke and flames were seen coming from equipment in the future Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, which has been called Cop City by anti-police. Yeah, okay. So we just kind of go into the training facility is located in southeast Atlanta on Key Road, where protesters opposing the construction of the facility had their big clash. So police are doing their thing right now. Police are doing their thing, which is probably they're going to have to shut this bad boy down, right? Because you saw the beginnings of construction equipment in there. You saw what, a grader? I mean, was that a bulldozer? I think it was a bulldozer. It was hard to tell. It was on fire and billowing smoke, but I believe that was a bulldozer of sorts. They lit that on fire. I was listening to another news story that they did damage some of the, I don't know if it was infrastructure, because it doesn't seem to me that they haven't done much digging. They haven't done much construction, but a bunch of stuff was damaged on this construction site. So they're going to have to start over. But to me, it didn't look like there was much that has been done, because the vast majority of this site is still heavily treed. And you got these numbnuts running around in there playing grab ass and building tree forts. I don't know about you, but when's the last time you considered living in a tree fort? Yeah, I built tree forts as a kid. They were cool. I mean, yeah, I'm going to go live in the woods. I lived on 10 acres in remote area of Snohomish, up on top of kind of a mountain. It was called Lord's Hill. And we lived at the very tippy top. My dad had built a big custom home. We were way the heck out. Tree forts, yeah, those are cool. But, until you're like 10. And then, yeah, girls don't really want to go in the tree fort, so let's just move on. But these people are coming from all over. And you got one from Canada, you got one from France. I mean, they love their tree fort. There's nothing like a good Atlanta, Georgia tree fort, right? Wild stuff. So I expect this storyline to keep going, at least one or two more revolutions. And we'll just have to see how it goes. But they're at the beginning stages of really starting to develop this site, right? And when they start to go, they can't have nonsense like this because they're going to bring in a bunch of equipment. You're going to have all kinds of people on site, and they're going to be going through, a massive construction process. And see, you can't have, this kind of thing happening. And so that's why I think it's happening at the beginning, because they haven't flattened the forest yet. And, like every construction site, they're going to clear parts of the forest. They're going to retree it. They've got a plan. They've got some kind of environmental plan. Yeah, they're going to take some trees down, but guess what? You're going to have to do that unless you're going into an area where you're gentrifying it and tearing the buildings down. They're not doing that. They need much bigger facility. And the facility that they have right now in Atlanta, Georgia is, from my understanding, pretty archaic. And if you want these officers and these first responders to have the best training possible, then you got to give them training centers. And that's exactly what this is. But now it's just going down this crazy, we all love trees type deal, and hate cops, love trees. And yet, throwing fireworks and Molotov cocktails out of the forest at local law enforcement. That is not going to go. It's not going well in Atlanta, Georgia. So what will be another thing that will be really interesting is to see how many of these charges stick and how much time these people actually get. I believe they'll get some time. I do. I mean, we've actually seen some of that down in Portland, where you've got the most notable people that did the craziest crimes, get a couple of years here and there. And oftentimes they'll get released for time served because they're already in jail or they've already been in jail. So, those are the kind of things that we're going to see moving forward. Another thing I wanted to talk about just super quick was the fact that one of the law enforcement agencies, guys from Georgia, basically said, hey, this is in Atlanta now, but very quickly, this could be in your neighborhood. And that is the real concern, right? Because this group, Antifa and whomever else is involved in there, even though they're loose knit, they're very mobile. They move around. So coming soon to a neighborhood near you? Geez, I hope not. And that's why I'm glad this happened in Atlanta. And I hope the officials of Atlanta put as many of these folks in jail as they can for as long as they can. Because you do this kind of stuff, you roll the dice in, environment like Georgia, you go to jail. And I'm okay with that. I am totally 100% okay with that. All right. That's it for me. I'm going to take a look at some of the comments you guys are talking about here. And you guys are going. Yeah, you guys are going. You guys are talking about all kinds of stuff. All right. I'm probably going to go too. I gotta just do some crazy stuff. And it's been a wild couple of weeks. And if those of you follow know, I lost my kid and I'm still having to deal with a bunch of stuff, but I wanted to keep the whole live stream going because, we got to do that and talk about stuff like this because life does go on. Believe it or not, it's wild. It does happen. So, all right. Thank you all for being here. And that's it. And all the comments. I'll check this out. All right. Catch up soon. Talk then, guys. Bye for now.